We're going to really focus in a little bit more now on the caring motivational system and link compassion to attachment theory. Otherwise, compassion just sort of floats around there as compassion is something nice and good, and it's about being kind and stuff like that. But what we're interested in is how we can identify the physiological systems that we need to be plumbing into in order to be doing compassion work. So this is section is called Caring, Attachment, Loneliness and Disconnection, because one of the great issues in human suffering is disconnection. So you've seen these slides before, which shows you again, and we looked at that. The root of the archetype of compassion really is maternal caring, and then that became adapted by evolution in many different dimensions. So we've done that, that's the definition. And we looked at the fact that what turns caring into compassion is this unique and amazing set of cortical processes, brain processes, probably mostly in the frontal cortex, and that turns that into that. So let's have a think about the psychology of nurturance. Now, when I was starting compassion, I was very influenced by Alan Vogel's work on nurturance and how to nurture. And Alan had said that nurturance has a number of qualities. And these qualities involve the awareness of the need, that it's something that needs to be done, right? That's the first thing. Then motivation to do something, so I can see that you need nurturing, but bad luck, I don't want to do it. Understanding what is needed, expression of what is needed, and changing your behavior according to whether it's helpful or not. So this is a very old, well, it's not that old, 86, not that old, but these understandings of what is it that goes into caring. So these qualities and components. So you want to get across to you this idea that compassion, you split it up into its qualities and components, because when you're doing therapy, you are identifying the components, because people can be good at some components, but not others. For example, people with psychopathic problems can be quite good at empathy. They can understand, they can be very manipulative, they can ingratiate themselves, but they don't have any caring motivation. Whereas people on the autistic spectrum, they can be quite caring, particularly to animals, but they struggle with empathy. They find it difficult. The understanding aspect is difficult for them. So that was the beginning of compassion focused therapy, was really here. So what we know is that there was a range of physiological adaptations that allowed caring and care seeking. Now the point about it is, this is what we call a co-evolved system. Caring is a co-evolved system, and what that means is that as the parent begins to evolve capacities for caring and nurturant, the infant needs to evolve capacities to be responsive. Okay? Because no good in picking up a reptile or a snake and giving it a stroke, because it doesn't have any mechanisms of responding to being stroked. So it's co-regulated. This co-regulation of emotion. Okay, very, very important. And this is called a tuning. So the behavior in the parent has an impact on the infant. Now this is important in therapy, right? Because if you may well be in a caring position and being caring, but your client is not tuning into it. They're not responding for one reason or another. So this co-relationship is important. And part of the caring process was to facilitate the ability of infant and parent to be close to each other, so they didn't hurt each other. Okay? They were able to orientate to be helpful, not harmful. Now for fish are not like that. Fish are cannibalistic, actually, quite often. They eat their own young. And so Paul MacLean, the neuroscientist, said, the evolution of caring began with a dictate: don't eat the kids. Quite important, that just in case you hadn't realised that. It's quite important. So the first thing is called kin recognition. Don't harm your offspring. And in fact, caring behavior evolves with an awareness of causing harm. Okay, this is quite important. That's not important for other forms of interactions early on, but in the parent-child interaction is very important. So mammalian caring comes with a harm avoidance mechanism. Otherwise, parents would just, and it does sometimes happen, roll over on their kids or hurt their kids or bite them too hard or whatever. So that's important. And the vagus particularly actually is involved in all of that stuff. Then there's a hormone called oxytocin. And this oxytocin is involved in all kinds of pair bonding behavior. There's the different types of vole. One vole has oxytocin receptors and they don't form close pair bonds, but the other vole does, and they do. So that's very important. So what I want to introduce you to now is, okay, so we've got caring, so what does caring actually do? What's the functions of caring? And there's a very famous psychiatrist called John Bowlby who developed what was called attachment theory. Now, attachment theory suggests that there are three fundamental functions of attachment, and these fundamental functions of attachment you're going to see again when it comes to compassion. So the first one is called proximity maintenance. And this is a mechanism that operates between the infant and the parent so that they remain close to each other and that they will become distressed if that is broken. Okay? So you've all had, so perhaps not all of you, but some of you who have had children know that when you lose contact to your child, you don't know where they've gone, they've got lost, this causes anxiety, and for the child too. So have a think about this for a moment. Can you remember a time when you were young, maybe 6 or 7 years old, a bit older or younger, and you got lost? You got lost in the store or on this, in the woods or up in the mountains. What happened to you? Just reflect for a moment, if you can remember, what happened in your body? What happened to your attention? So the point is that the absence, the withdrawal of a signal of safeness, just the removal of that signal, activates the threat system. In other words, the threat system is being kept under control all the time in the child because the child has some sense of having access to a parent. The moment that's broken, where's mum, where's dad? Up comes the threat system. And in that position, does strangers help you? Not really. So even though you're not in a dangerous situation, okay, there are no lions around as far as we know, although Gary told me there were mountain lions up there. And there may well be many others. You might get lost in a big department store. There's many others. And there may be strangers trying to soothe you and calm you. It isn't any good. You need your mum or your dad, right? So this is important. So people don't realize this, but actually there is a monitoring system all the time for the access and availability of the parent. That's called proximity maintenance or proximity monitoring. Now this is going to be important because I was just talking to Patrick who's had to go. And what we know is that people who are lonely have higher levels of stress and threat sensitivity, high levels of cortisol, as if they are in an attachment disruption situation. Isn't it interesting? So we'll come on to that. So this is important because when you're doing compassionate self and compassionate image, what you're going to be doing is thinking about how available is this part of me to be there to help me. The second function, John said, was the creation of a secure base. And this secure base is the capacity for the parent to encourage, support, and take an interest in the child. There are many different aspects to a secure base, but part of it is also in helping the child to face and learn about life, really. So it's called the secure base, the jumping off point. It facilitates the child's exploration. And then the third aspect is called safe haven. And this is the ability for the parent to calm the child down when the child has got distressed. So the parent can stimulate the child to explore the world, and then if the child gets distressed, the parent is a soothing agent. Now these are fundamentally three fundamental things that have to underpin compassion when you're doing compassionate mind training. But your compassionate mind is something you can turn into, you can seek out when you need it, it will encourage you and support you, and it can also help calm you down. So those three things are going to be crucial. So there we are. This is another aspect of attachment. Attachment stimulates the drive system in secure base. It gives a sense of joyfulness. We actually learn to feel good about ourselves because other people feel good about us. We know that the way in which the mother and others really look at the child has a major impact on the stimulation of the child's drive systems in particular. It excites the child. I don't know if any of you have been new parents recently, but what facial expressions do you make when you see a young baby or you go to communicate with a baby? What do you automatically do?
Raise your voice.
Exactly. You have a particular smile, right? And you speak in a particular way. Oh, who's a pretty boy then? Could you go? You don't have a blank face. Hello. Hello, baby. You're a cute baby. You're a cute baby, you are. So it doesn't work. So facial expressions, voice tones, very important, stimulating the baby's developing fast-growing systems. And the attunement between these processes are extremely important. And so the child is monitoring the emotional textures in the mind of the mother. How do I exist in the mind of my mother or in my father or anybody is related to how they are responding to me. And I'm learning about myself, but I'm also learning about myself as a social agent. Okay? So have you all seen the still face? Have you seen still face? How many of you have not seen still face? Okay. Well, maybe I'll just show it very quickly, because it's quite a nice thing. So I'll get into it quite quickly for you. So really just to show you the importance of this attunement. Where's it gone to?
Babies this young are extremely responsive to the emotions and the reactivity and the social interaction that they get from the world around them. This is something that we started studying 30, 40 years ago, when people didn't think that infants could engage in social interaction. In the still face experiment, what the mother did was she sits down and she's playing with her baby who's about a year of age. And she gives a greeting to the baby gives a greeting back to her. This baby starts pointing at different places in the world, and the mother's trying to engage her and play with her. They're working to coordinate their emotions and their intentions, what they want to do in the world. And that's really what the baby is used to. And then we ask the mother to not respond to the baby. The baby very quickly picks up on this. And then she uses all of her abilities to try and get the mother back. She smiles at the mother. She points because she's used to the mother looking where she points. The baby puts both hands up in front of her and says, "What's happening here?" she makes that screechy sound at the mother, like, come on, why aren't we doing this? Even in this 2 minutes, when they don't get the normal reaction, they react with negative emotions, they turn away, they feel the stress of it, they actually lose control of their posture because of the stress that they're experiencing.
Now, a couple of things about that. Firstly, the lack of the signal, the stopping of the signal is what stimulates the threat system. And the return of the signal activates the soothing system and then the drive system, the play system, very quickly. So this is a very secure child. So these signals are extremely powerful, right, in the developing child. The quality of the relationship between the mother and the baby is extremely important.
It's a little like the good, the bad, and the ugly. The good is that normal stuff that goes on, that we all do with our kids. The bad is when something bad happens, but the infant can overcome it. After all, when you stop the still face, the mother and the baby start to play again. The ugly is when you don't give the child any chance to get back to the good. There's no reparation, and they're stuck in that really ugly situation.
So that's a very, very important thing, and that for many of our clients who come from difficult backgrounds, that's exactly what's happened. There's been disruptions or difficulties or whatever, and the child has been left in an ugly place. In other words, they haven't had the inputs they need to downregulate threat processing. So what Eric is saying is that, disruptions can occur, but if the child can repair the emotions through the relationship with the parent, all is well. But if they can't, it's difficult. And many of our clients, they often have many, many experiences of just being left in a place that there is no reparation. And children who are abused or neglected, they just don't get any reparations. They often can't turn to the parent because the parent is often the source of the threat. So they're just left in what Sarah calls this ugly place. Unregulated threat processing. Unregulated threat processing, which becomes quite a serious problem. Here's another example, which I think is quite nice, which shows you the power of the cues of attachment to help the child overcome threat.
Babies between 9 and 12 months are placed on a large plexiglass-topped table. Half of the table has a checkerboard pattern just underneath the surface, which the baby thinks is plenty safe to crawl on. But halfway across is a visual cliff, which the baby can tell drops off steeply. The plexiglass top continues, so we know it's perfectly fine to proceed. But the baby isn't so sure. And this is a big drop for a baby just starting to crawl. She wants to get across to get the toy, but she's learned to be cautious from dealing with stairs and such. This is where the adult comes in.
In this particular investigation, what we attempted to understand is the extent to which the nonverbal facial communication coming from the mother to the child powerfully affected that baby's behavior. If the mother is posing a fear face, the baby typically does not cross this stair step downward, this modified visual flip and visual step. On the other hand, if the mother poses a smile or somehow poses a nonverbal communication that is not prohibitive but encouraging, the child is much more likely to cross over to her. This particular study demonstrates the role of nonverbal communication in determining the child's behavior in uncertain contexts.
So these are really old pieces of research. They're brilliant. They're all very brilliant research pieces. That the quality of the relationship between the parent and child really attunes, creates positive emotion and the experience of being loved and engaged, attunement, and then also the ability to engage in things that are potentially frightening. So, you know, this is very crucial. So imagine the child has to go to a party, you know, they're going to a party, and but they're getting anxious. So a dismissive parent says, what are you getting anxious about? And the child says, well, I don't really know anybody because, you know, it's Sally, and I don't know Sally's friends. And the mother says, or father says, well, don't be silly, it's a party, there'll be jellies there, you know. Who knows, you might even get a present to come home with. You go to the party. So dismissive. The anxious mother says, oh, if you're not going to enjoy it, there's no point in going. You can stay home with me. If you're anxious, you don't have to go. Whereas the secure mother says, oh, well, I'll tell you what, we'll go along. You can visit the party, go in for a while, see if you like it. If you don't, then I'll be outside. But just go and give it a go. So the secure parent is always encouraging with support. And there's a lovely video which my daughter actually found me. I'll see if I can find you to show you this. Just got to remember what these things are. I've got too many of these things. This one. Sorry about this. Might be this way. So this poor little girl's having a bit of a meltdown. She's this little girl here, getting very upset. Dad. Here comes Dad. Now notice, she wants to be picked up, right? But he doesn't do that. That is psychotherapy. That is psychotherapy. So it's a lovely little shot. My daughter found that for me on the internet. So when somebody's very distressed, you get alongside them and help them to engage in this stuff, right? The problem that you have is, particularly for young therapists, and we've all done it, I've been there, is you become rescuers. And so what a rescuer parent would have done is to pick the child up, take them away. So the child never learns how to be able to overcome their anxiety, overcome their distress. So, the father was brilliant there. And also, of course, the child clearly trusts the father. That's very important as well. So sometimes when you're in therapy, what you're doing is you're getting alongside them, you're acting as a secure base, but you're not trying to rescue them, you're helping them move forward into what it is they need to be able to do. And although sometimes it can feel pretty tricky doing that, helping them to stay with their distress is important. So there we are, that's the triangle, and these are all interacting processes, as we will see. This is Heinz Kohlhardt, who also said, well, the other thing about the child experiences, that the child feels valued, to feel positively existent in the mind of the other. And I think this is something that's very important in therapy. Sometimes we don't show the clients that we really do value their courage. We really do see their efforts as important, and we take pleasure from their efforts. The therapist can take pleasure for seeing the change in the patient. Now think about this. If you're a client, if you're a patient, and your patient is clearly taking delight in the changes you're making and the growth you're showing, just think what that would be like, as opposed to a therapist who doesn't seem that bothered. You know, you're just doing what you're supposed to be doing. Okay? But it has to be genuine, because there's nothing worse than having people say, oh, that's really good. Oh, you did so well there. And you kind of get it, this is a rehearsal, right? You know. So you do have therapists who know the right thing to say, but not how to say it. So again, the point about it is recognizing that this capacity to create courage partly comes because here is another human being, my therapist, who is really taking pleasure in my growth and my change process, because it has an interest in my growth and my change process. Empathic validation is important, and identification also is important. Another person very important in attachment was, of course, Mary Ainsman, who developed the secure, the anxious system, avoidance system, and we can show you that in a moment. And these are different attachment styles that you can see in children. So let me just bring that up for you now. Okay, you're going to see a little bit about attachment and epigenetics. So I'll show you that bit first, because it's quite nice, this bit.
These monkeys living in this enclosure, they live here year-round, and they can handle the winter climate changes pretty easily. And it shows all the characteristics of a truth that you would find in the wild. Studying this colony of monkeys over 15 years, Dr. Sumi has made an intriguing discovery that monkeys too have a genetic vulnerability to depression. We find that about 20% of our population responds to normal challenges in their day-to-day environment with unusual, fearful behaviors and anxious-like responses.
So that 20% who are sensitive, they're born like that and they're probably genetic.
Yes, it represents a genetic risk. It's passed from family to family, generation to generation.
Claims of a genetic component to depression in monkeys are supported by laboratory tests. They show that when stressed, the highly sensitive monkeys develop pronounced biochemical symptoms of depression.
You're a good baby. What I'm doing is giving her a cotton roll, which has had Kool-Aid, which is a sweetened fruit drink, put on it. It's very appealing to the babies. It's like a little lollipop.
From the monkey's saliva, researchers measure levels of a hormone called cortisol, a strong indicator for depression.
When they're stressed, those monkeys who are at risk for developing severe behaviors show much higher levels of cortisol in response to the situation. The cortisol shows huge increases relative to other monkeys.
But being genetically susceptible to depression is only part of the equation.
Whether or not some individual with this risk actually gets depressed is very much dependent on what sort of early experiences it had when it was an infant. For an individual growing up with a mother that isn't so sensitive, that is not so able to provide security, the risk of depressive reactions are actually increased.
So the infant is made frightened by the parent. The parent's behavior is stimulating the infant's threat system. And you can see that's a high threat. So in abuse cases and in aggressive families, the child are constantly having the threat system stimulated without any opportunity for resolution and downgrading in the parasympathetic system.
Whereas mothers that are very sensitive to their infants, that form strong attachment bonds with them, and that teach them social skills, infants born to mothers of that sort have a much greater chance of escaping depressive episodes, even if they carry that genetic risk.
So this is quite phenomenal, and this is quite old research now, but we know this, that even if you carry genetic risk, the quality of the care that you receive in your early life can offset that risk turning into things like depression. It's not a guarantee by any means, but it is an important buffering factor or helping factor. So the point is that caring even has epigenetic effects. Now this is important because we're doing some studies in Portugal looking at the epigenetic effects of compassion training. Because we think that for a number of reasons, caring turns on different systems in the motivational systems which have epigenetic effects. This is another interesting bit here. What's this?
That one's sleeping very close to us.
That's a younger infant. That infant is only about 3 months of age. It's actually at the age where it's just beginning to explore, and it just stole something and came running back to its mother. It's very clear where the source of safety is.
So that's an example of secure base. The child goes out, takes a risk, comes back. Now that will be a dominant female. Because if it was a subordinate female, then they would have got into trouble.
It's a lovely example.
If that infant's mother were not there, it would not have the initiative to go out and try anything on its own.
After several years working in this controlled environment, Dr. Subi has established that if sensitive monkeys have bad mothers, they are much more likely to be depressed than if they are brought up in a secure family. It's not so easy to test these theories on children.
We'll have you do a brief interaction with some play, then in just a few minutes, we'll send you back in, step in the door.
Everett Waters is studying how far our childhood experiences influence our behavior as adults.
Come in the lab after this now.
This experiment, which I watched through a two-way mirror, is designed to gauge how secure is the crucial relationship between mother and child.
Okay, this bunny is going to go here, and that bunny will be on
The value of the test has been established in studies that would watch a child, 1-year-old, and then follow it up and interview them about their relationships to their parents when they were 21 years old. So we're quite confident in the long-term significance of this relationship.
After several minutes play, the mother is signaled to leave the room.
I'll get you back in 1 minute.
Now notice, nothing has happened. There's no lion appeared, no snakes appeared. It's simply the removal of the signal of the mother, the safeness signal, that then the threat system kicks up. So that signal, mother being present, had kept the threat system turned off, basically. And now the signal's gone, so
But she'll survive. The key moment in the experiment is the child's reaction to her mother's return.
The important clue is whether the baby's able to become calmed down by the contact with the mother, get back to play.
So does the mother stimulate the soothing system, all right? Because it's not just about down-regulating threat. You have to actually stimulate the soothing system, because that's the thing that's going to, bring threat down. So that's the mother's comfort and caring, does that quite quickly.
Sometimes it takes a couple of minutes. You see, when the mother was out, she was only interested in the mother, no interest in the toys. Now she has a contact with her mother. She's beginning to show a little interest in the environment, and shortly she'll be right back with the toys where we started.
So you would call this a secure one?
Yes.
You said too much, haven't you?
Now, this is an insecure baby. We get the measure of the baby's play before the separation. When the mother leaves, the baby cries, goes to the door following her. Now, we sent the mother right back in with the point.
Now, one of the things you might notice, you're a big group, so I can't ask you what you notice, but one of the things you might notice is there's hardly any distress call here. The other child made a racket, didn't she? Crying and looking for mum and seeing if she was behind the screen. This baby just goes, ah. That's it. And then it's silent. Very different distress call.
It's the baby. We're just trying to challenge it. The baby puts her hands to her face in a sad expression, her face down.
Whoa, whoa, whoa. This is a very different response to the return of the parent. Okay, this.
When she picks her up, she keeps her head down, her arms out, and then she sits in the chair holding the baby. The baby's still sullen. He's low-keyed.
So you would call this insecure?
Yes, insecure. He's avoidant. He's not engaging her, and it's not the reunion's not effective. And it's important to remember here that the thing that upset him was her absence. Her return should be the solution to it.
The most important thing here is the deactivation of the drive system. It's completely become deactivated. Right? So it's not just that he's not engaged, he has a deactivated drive system.
This problem. Now this is another pattern that we see in babies who are not good at using their mother as a secure base at home. This baby is also insecure. But you'll see, we get a look at his play before the separation. The mother's left. When she returns, she picks him up. He can't calm down. He's still upset. She offers a toy to amuse him or to comfort him or to distract him, and he slaps it away. She offers another. He slaps it away. He's angry.
See, very different, right? Very different responses to the return of the parent. So while the parent's there, everything's fine, but the return of the parent tells you whether that soothing system is working or not. Is that green system working or not? In the first case, yes. In the second two cases, no. In the avoidant, there is a demobilization. And in this one, there's more of an angry, anxious presentation.
We call these babies resistant or ambivalent because they both want her back and yet can't use the contact. We think that the difficulty is that in the past, when he sought comfort, she's been inconsistent as to whether she's available and responsive or not.
Do you think these really are indications for vulnerability for depression later in life?
I don't think that insecure attachment in infancy is the cause of depression in adulthood. However, when a child learns that he can trust his mother to be available and responsive, he's beginning to learn that you can trust other people, that you can turn to them when you're in trouble. The baby is also taught by the mother, as he gets older, how to understand his emotions, how to construe events that happen to them. You know, every bump in the road is not a disaster. This is a powerful asset when you encounter difficulties in life.
What Professor Waters has
So the point is, and what I'm just very, very quickly this afternoon giving you a glimpse of this concept of attachment theory and how the quality of a caring agent or a caring object in psychoanalysis, if you like, has these abilities to maintain security when they're there and to reactivate soothing when they return if there's been a break. And for those children who find that very difficult to activate their soothing system. So I'm going to show you now a little bit of a client case.
follow these infants into adulthood to see whether those with insecure attachment to their mothers are more likely to get depressed. However, studies on adult depressives have shown that severe abuse or neglect in childhood are serious causes of depression. Philip Wood wants to find out the origins of the depression that forced him to quit his career.
It wasn't really the pressure at work. For many years I was able to hide behind the role of being a theatre manager. I looked the part and dressed up every night. But eventually it all came to a head. I had a breakdown and I went to a psychiatric day centre for about 3 years.
In his quest for answers, Philippa's volunteered to take part in a controlled study into the impact that childhood experience has on adult depression. Dr. Bruin, hello, Philip.
That's Chris Bruin, very young Chris Bruin. So we did a lot of research with, well, some research with Chris on virtual reality and self-criticism.
I'd like to ask you about some of the experiences.
Okay, now, with our trainees, can't do this because it's a big group, but with our trainees, we say to them, you are going to be told enough information to last you for weeks and weeks in 40 seconds. 40 seconds, well, okay, 50, I'll give you 50 seconds. I'll be generous, 50 seconds. 50 seconds. So what I want you to do, as you listen to this, is to try to work out the attachment issues of this client, what the kind of issues are likely to be, the kind of working relationship this guy's got with his attachment objects, and how that might influence your therapy. Okay? So that's your mission, should you choose to accept it? Okay, here we go.
Times in your life. First of all, was there anything that stands out as being particularly disappointing or upsetting about your childhood?
I don't remember specifically. What I remember more than anything is my father's cold, unapproachable personality and his tendency to become very angry and take it out on either my brother or myself or on mother. He would wade in with his hands, not fists, but with his hands slapping and kicking, and then send me up to my room or Chris up to his room, and he'd always come up about half an hour or an hour later and apologise.
All right. Okay, so have a think about what you've seen, because there's a massive amount of information there, huge amount of information. So when we're training our therapists, we train them to pay attention to the attachment dynamic, otherwise you get lost. So let's pay attention to the attachment dynamic.
Answers. Philippa's volunteered to take part in a controlled study into the impact that childhood experience has on adult depression. Dr. Bruin, hello, Philip. Come on.
I'd like to ask you about some of the experiences that you've had at different times in your life. First of all, was there anything that stands out as being particularly disappointing or upsetting about your childhood?
I don't remember specifically.
Now this is classic of incoherent attachment. I don't remember anything specifically, but now he's going to give you a lot of specifics.
What I remember more than anything is my father's cold, unapproachable personality and his tendency to become very angry and take it out on either my brother or myself or on mother.
So what have you learned? So this is a father who wasn't loving sometimes but would get drunk, or this is a father that was loving sometimes but sometimes would lose it. This is a cold father, a cold, unapproachable father who could suddenly explode. What else do we know? That he was doing this to his brother and his mother. So this patient, Phil, was also witnessing this. He was witnessing violence. He was witnessing violence that probably he couldn't do anything about. Probably wasn't able to defend his mother, as another aspect. And there's probably no protectors. Nobody's going to come and protect him from the attacks from his father. This is quite serious, right? So you hold that in mind. This is growing up in an environment where there's this cold, aggressive guy that's tyrannizing. There's no protectors from this guy. There's no one that will support you. And you're just going to have to kind of cope by yourself, really.
He would wade in with his hands, not fists, with his hands slapping and kicking.
So that's quite incredible, isn't it? You know, imagine you're a child, and your adults wading in, slapping and kicking you. So this is a scary thing, right? So children can be very frightened of parents because parents are, twice their size or whatever. So the parents are losing control or whatever.
And send me up to my room or Chris up to his room, and he'd always come up about half an hour or an hour later and apologise.
Okay, so now let's think about this. Now remember, emotions that fire together wire together. So just have a think about what you think of the main emotions this child has experienced, Philip will be experiencing when he goes to his room. Well, there'd be two: fear and loneliness. Fear and separateness, because there's no one coming to protect him. Okay? So fear and loneliness will fuse together, won't they? They will become fused. That's emotional conditioning. When emotions fire together, they wire together. Okay? And then his father comes up and apologizes. Now, why is that a problem? Well, it's a problem because he has to play the game. What's he going to say to his dad? Yeah. This aggressive, cold guy, what's he going to say? You do that to me again, I'll take you to the police, you know what I mean? I don't want any of that shit in this house. No, he's not going to do that, is he? He's going to play a submissive card. I'm so sorry, Daddy. I'm so sorry, Daddy. It's okay. It's okay. We begin to see the beginning of the submissive. Don't hurt me. Don't hurt me. It's my fault. It's my fault. This is where we begin to see it, right? In these aggressive families, chakras. So we have fear and loneliness wired together.
And anger.
And, well, the anger is an important point. That you make an important point. The anger will be suppressed. He's not going to be able to express anger or even feel anger to his father. The anger will be suppressed, and that will be an issue later in the therapy. But at this point, these are the things that are coming. And so when his father comes in, he'll just be wanting to relieve both of them of the anxiety. If I apologize and I'm nice to Dad, somehow we can make up, we can repair the bond, then I shall feel better. So I thought, and you know, I know this is a religious community, but sometimes this is what people do to God, isn't it? Please don't be angry with me. Don't be angry with me. I will do what you want, oh God. I do what. We have the same basic idea that if I do bad things, you're going to really hurt me unless I go like this. So this is a psychology of defense, right? So let's see how this now works out for this guy. And my friend here is absolutely right. The inhibition of anger uprank is very powerful.
Are incidents from childhood coming into your mind regularly during the past months?
Well, one
That's been particularly disappointing or upsetting by your childhood?
I don't remember specifically. What I remember more than anything is my father's cold, unapproachable personality and his tendency to become very angry and take it out on either my brother or myself or mother. He would wade in with his hands, not fists, with his hands slapping and kicking, and then send me up to my room or Chris up to his room, and he'd always come up about half an hour or an hour later and apologise.
Have you noticed any particular incidents from childhood coming into your mind regularly during the past months?
Well, one memory I do have, which is based on a recurring dream, which I haven't had for some time, but I do find myself thinking about it. And the dream was that I was about to be executed with a group of other people. And I was in some orange, almost like a Ku Klux Klan robe with a hood. And the executioner came up to me and took off my hood and then took off his hood, and it was my father.
Now, in psychodynamic therapy, we'd call that an internalized persecuting object. Now, this is important because these memories of hostile parenting get laid down in these memory systems so that they sit in the mind, and they do come out in dreams. And depressed people can have these dreams of being persecuted, being hurt, being injured, because that's what they've got in their memory, right? This is not made up stuff, that's in their memory. And these are called internalized persecuting objects. Basically, internalized persecuting memories, or internalized memories of being hurt. Same thing, really. But internalized persecuting objects sounds so much better, doesn't it, really? So the point is, if you have this in your head, that these are your internal representations of others, and then you're having these dreams, and you can imagine what it's like when you wake up from dreams. Sometimes, you know, depressed people wake up from dreams and they feel very frightened or very anxious in the mornings because they've been having these reoccurring processes going on, right? And look at the association of the emotion to this dream.
What's the emotions that you associate with this memory?
Fear and also being alone, which is a feeling that I seem to have experienced all my life. of being alone.
There it is. There it is. I grew up in this house, no protectors. And then when I was hurt, I was on my own. Right? This issue of disconnected, the sense of disconnection from others, the sense that I'm alone in the world in a way, unless I can somehow earn my place in the world, is very, very common in depressed people.
Certainly, statistically, if we look at a group of people who are depressed, they are much more likely to have had difficult childhood experiences than a group who've never been depressed. This could involve physical violence, it could involve sexual molestation, it could involve the experience of being neglected and ignored, or being brought up in an environment that was constantly hostile or denigratory.
There's a memory I have of playing the piano when I was about 11 or 12, and my father walked into the room and said, "This is one of my favourite pieces of music," and then turned on his heel and walked out of the room. And I can remember sitting there and seeing myself sitting in the lounge at home, the sun streaming in with hyacinths over.
See, that's a highly emotional. He told you right just a few minutes ago, he doesn't have any memories. That's a really highly numerous memory, what Jung would call a numerous memory. You can actually remember the hyacinths, remember the smell. So powerful, so many people, that even when I do something my father likes, it's still no good. He still just walks out on me.
And I remember thinking, well, what a strange thing to do. You just said that you like this piece of music, but you've turned around and walked out of the room and turned your back on me. There are so many thoughts that go around in my mind. It's like carrying a big weight that is increasing in size by the second and preventing me from getting on with my life.
Philip exemplifies very well some of the themes that we've found. It's clearly, from what he said, difficult for him to control a whole stream of negative memories, and he described, I think, very graphically how one memory leads on to another. If you're really being bombarded by these memories, then a number of things happen. First of all, you're liable to think more negatively about yourself and about your situation. And secondly, it's going to be harder for you to recover from depression than if you haven't got these things constantly coming into your mind.
Mine was a relatively...
Okay, that's a nice. Okay, so that's to put a little bit of textures to these things we call attachment theory, where you begin to see that, this person had no where he could turn to that would be supportive and helpful. He was left with this experience of fear without resolution. It's called fear without resolution, and grows up with this real struggle of how to compete in the world, be in the world, feel connected in the world. Okay, so so there are things that are written down where you can, if you want to do ask clients questions about, proximity seeking. Look at the proximity seeking. Who were your main carers that you would wish to be close to? How did you feel being close to your main carers? Would you seek them out if you needed them? Did you feel they would look after you, your best interests? Who protected you? How did your carers support and encourage you to grow? Did they show an interest in your development? Did they take an interest in playing with you, doing things with you? So these are all ways in which you can get some insight, if you're working with these kind of clients, to the experience of, do they have this capacity? Yeah, there were people around there, people who took an interest in me, and yeah, I could be soothed. Empathic validation. Did your main carers understand your feelings? How did they show that they had empathy for you? Okay. Did your main carers help you understand your emotions and appreciate your feelings? Did you feel your main carers loved you? They were proud of you, perhaps. So these are all basic questions, and what you'll find is that in some of the more difficult clients, they will remember their parents as being critical, or maybe shaming, or frightening, or interfering, or demanding, or needing. Some parents are quite envious. Okay? It's all right for you, it's easy for you because you've got life easy. I had life much more difficult than you. Envious attacks. Okay, so those are all of the things you can read about. But we also know that early parenting can even have an impact on callous emotional traits. So even children who are orientated a little bit towards callousness, actually, if they get warm parenting, caring parenting, that has an impact on them. So how does caring become more based in the community? Well, the fact is that living in small groups as we did, our sense of belonging and altruism and so forth were part and parcel of good group living. Because if you were not cared for by your group, you died, basically. If you got disconnected from your group or you got rejected from your group, that was the end of it. We also know from the fossil records that early humans were surviving even when they had broken bones and diseases because they were cared for in their community. Being cared for in your community was hugely important, particularly when you were ill, hugely important. Now, we know that in chimpanzees don't do that. For example, in 1976, I think it was, in the Norm Valley, where Jane Goodall was the primatologist, brilliant woman, they had an episode of polio, very tragically, and some of the chimpanzees she was studying became paralyzed in arms or legs, and the other chimpanzees just avoided them. They certainly wouldn't go and feed them or help them. But humans clearly have helped each other with diseases and injuries and so forth. So this is fundamentally important. So we have been able to extend caring behavior to caring for our community, not just caring for our children, caring for our community. But the point about it is that these communities are relatively small, 50, maybe 150 people. We lived in these small groups for, over 2 million years. Neanderthals also were very caring, actually. They weren't the brutish apes that are often pointed out to be. They were also very caring. So caring behavior has been phenomenally important in human evolution, and some people believe, I'm one of them, that believes that caring behavior actually is what drove human social intelligence. Social intelligence didn't drive caring, caring drove social intelligence. You don't need to be very intelligent to be aggressive, but to be caring and to be nurturing and to know what people need and to help them and so on, then you do. So now let's have a think about how does all this impact on physiology? We've been talking a lot about the physiology of caring. Well, first point of call is your autonomic nervous system, which is split into two. There's your parasympathetic and your sympathetic. And to cut a long story short, your sympathetic is basically the system which prepares your body for action. So it stimulates organs in such a way that they can release energy and help you to do what you need to do. So, for example, when you activate your sympathetic nervous system, then that inhibits saliva, it relaxes your bronchial, so you can breathe faster, accelerates your heart rate, it inhibits digestion, because you don't want a lot of digestion going on there, you want to tighten that up because you're going to have to run away. It releases sugars and so on and so on. So this is like the accelerator in your body. Okay, but you don't want to be like that all the time, because if you're in that high state of activity, then you're going to get burnt out and your life will be relatively short. So when the threat is past, you need your body to calm down as quickly as possible, okay, to come back to some kind of homeostasis. So when you've got away from the lion, or whatever it is, then you need to be able to calm down. Now, if you think about your car, there are two ways you can calm, well, three ways actually. You can slow your car down. You can take your foot off the accelerator, and that will slow it down eventually, or you can put your brake on. And the parasympathetic system is sometimes called the brake, the vagal brake. And your parasympathetic system will help to slow down your sympathetic system. So when you're stressed, your parasympathetic system is very important. And there are two aspects to your parasympathetic system. There's what's called the ventral part to it, the upper part of it, and then there's a part below your diaphragm, which is called the dorsal. I'm not going to go into that in too much detail. We're just going to focus on the upper part of your parasympathetic system. So sympathetic system is activation, and parasympathetic is slowing and calming, basically. It's a little bit more complicated than that, but that's okay. And they need to balance each other, really. And one of the areas that's very important is on your heart. So to cut a long story short, your sympathetic nervous system increases your heart rate, and your parasympathetic slows it down. Okay? So there's your parasympathetic system. There's the vagus nerve, the myelinated vagus nerve. It's called the vagus because it means wandering. It wanders all over the body. And it innervates all these different areas of your body, particularly your diaphragm. So your parasympathetic is constantly slowing down your sympathetic system. Without a parasympathetic system, your heart rate would be around 120 beats a minute. Because you've got a parasympathetic system, it's around 60 to 80. Or if you're very fit, it goes down to 50 when you get fit. So you want to be thinking about these systems in your brain and your body as co-regulating each other. They're co-regulating, co-controlling. One thing that your parasympathetic is being very attuned to is being cared for. So you have good parasympathetic tone if you've had a lot of caring, but if you haven't, then your sympathetic system tends to be a little bit more jumpy, put it like that. It doesn't have that regulation. So, vagal tone, the tone of your vagus, and Patrick's left us, but he's a brilliant researcher here, is doing work on this stuff. When you have good vagal tone, your parasympathetic system, particularly the myelinated part, your behavior tends to be calmer, you experience more positive emotion states, you have lower blood pressure. This is affected by your breathing, and we're going to be doing breathing exercises precisely to stimulate your vagus. Mindfulness increases vagal tone, and vagal tone is also associated with signals of affiliation, tend and befriend, voice tone, friendly face, and so forth. And it's responsive to cues of safeness. So when we feel safe, we tend to have good parasympathetic tone. When we feel threatened, then the parasympathetic tone is less, and the sympathetic system is stronger. When you're under stress, the first system that moves actually is not the sympathetic, it's the parasympathetic is the first part of change because it releases its brake, basically. Take the brakes off. So we often talk about heart rate variability, so this is it. So here is a reading of a cardiogram. So you can see the blumps. And the distance between each blump, 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 blump. The difference between each blump varies slightly because your heart rate speeds up a little bit, and then the parasympathetic system says, hang on, not so fast, I have to slow it down, slow down. So it slows it down. And then the sympathetic says, oh, not as slow as that, I'm going to speed it up. So it speeds it up. And your parasympathetic says, whoa, not so fast, not so fast. I'm going to slow you down. So what that does is it changes the time between each beat. So you're speeding up slightly, slowing down slightly. So here you can see, blum, 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 945 milliseconds, 897 milliseconds, 858 milliseconds. So this is called the interbeat interval. The interbeat interval. Okay? And then the standard deviation over a set period of the interbeat interval is called heart rate variability. Now, generally, the higher your heart rate variability, the better. Because what it means is that these systems are working nicely, smoothly together. When you have low heart rate variability, it means that the sympathetic system, usually sympathetic system, is more dominant, and you're getting a more regular bump, 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 okay? Generally speaking. It's a little bit more complicated than that, but that's basically it. So variation between the beats is good. High heart rate variability is good. Low heart variability not so good. And so what we know is that poor vagal tone, which is associated with lower heart rate variability. In other words, your vagus is not able to kind of downregulate the sympathetic very much, is associated with a range of mental health problems and also problems of social behavior. Now, interestingly enough, increasingly research is showing that the vagus, which is very important for being able to regulate our emotions, creating positive emotions, particularly the green system positive emotions, not so much the red and not so much the blue, because that's activation, that's winning the lottery, but the contented, the calming, the generally lower arousal type of positive emotions can also be affected by things like your diet. We now know that the vagus nerve is influenced by the bacteria in your gut. And I'm afraid to say, the human Western guts are not very good. We don't have a very good micro environment, and we suffer from all kinds of inflammatory problems, partly because we are eating poor foods, right? High carbohydrates, high refined foods. So another reason why this is important is diet. And one of the things we're trying to do when we're doing our compassion-focused therapy is we're going to gradually be building in dietary advice in our clients. Try and get them off high sugar, high carbohydrates. Okay? We suspect that diet will have to play an important part in psychotherapy in the years to come. These things we've been talking with Gary about and Doug about. Watch the diet. Particularly for some of our people with psychosis, the diets are terrible. Now, another way of thinking about this is in classical conditioning. Now, as you know, in the 1950s, reciprocal inhibition was simply the ways in which you try to create different emotional states for people, and then one state would block another. So if you were doing anxiety, you teach people how to relax, and then they would maybe approach their feared stimulus, be it a spider, whatever it is, they'd get anxious, and then they'd relax. And they'd approach the feared object, like a spider, and then they'd relax, and then they could do desensitization through this process of gradually relaxing. This was called reciprocal inhibition. It was great because, with spider phobics, you'd take a spider, get them to draw a spider, then they'd see a photograph of the spider, and then a dead spider, and then a live spider. The spider would bite the patient dies, end of the problem. We use classical conditioning in a similar sort of way, in the sense that we're creating these vagal-based states through the breathing, through the grounding, through the compassionate mind training, which I'm going to show you. We're creating a state that stimulates and activates the attachment systems of proximity, secure base, and safe haven to stimulate the vagus, stimulate part of the oxytocin, stimulate part of the frontal cortex to give us this capacity for caring in relationship to stress. So again, it's a kind of reciprocal inhibition. So basically, then the evolution of attachment and affiliative behavior created a range of neurophysiological structures. Oxytocin is a hormone, the vagus nerve, that when activated, organize the mind and help calm the mind, calm threat processing. Okay? So evolution has created a range of physiological systems that when you activate it, it downregulates the threat system. They've got some beautiful work, some wonderful work by Richie Davidson's laboratories. Helen Wang has done some wonderful work. So she's shown that people who do 8 weeks of loving kindness meditation, they actually change the sensitivity of the amygdala to threat processing. Okay, so I'm not going to, in 2 days, I can't go too much into neurophysiology, but there's quite a lot now of neurophysiological evidence that training in the breathing, training in the mindfulness, training in the compassion focusing does change your brain. And this is partly linked to what's called neuroplasticity. So here we are then. When we create our compassionate mind, which we will be doing not too distant future, we want this compassionate mind that we're going to train to function in a certain kind of way. Okay, when you practice becoming this compassionate person, and we'll teach you how to do that by breathing and focusing on compassionate intention and your compassionate skills, you're going to want it to act as your proximity system. In other words, when you get stressed, what do? When you get stressed, you remember, I must activate my compassionate mind. Hello, compassionate mind, where are you? Okay, I need to breathe. So now I ground myself, do my breathing, which we'll show you later, and I remember to move into a compassionate mind state. So when I'm distressed, the first thing I do is try to get into that state of mind. When I'm in that state of mind then is able to stimulate the physiological systems like the vagus and so forth that will help to calm me and ground me and provide me encouragement to face what I need to face and will validate me. Okay? So that's the point, that you're creating this compassionate inner state to function like an internalized attachment object, basically. Okay, that's what you're trying to get it to do all the functions that an attachment object would do. So you're beginning to internalize in your mind the capacity for a compassionate self to operate this system which nature has set up and is usually activated through the parent. Okay? So then, when you do this, it allows you to do these other things. It allows you to begin, when you're in your compassionate mind, to start to differentiate. Differentiation is the ability to make distinctions between different phenomena and processes. It's the basis of science, of course. In regard to our mind, empathic differentiation allows us to distinguish self from other. So when you're distressed and I'm distressed, I realize that my distress is because of your distress, and that you and I are indeed separate. Internally, it allows us to distinguish between different kinds of ongoing processes, between what a thought is and what a feeling is, between one emotion and another emotion, between an emotion and a motive. Okay? So when we are able to feel safe and secure, we can start to think about our emotions. We can begin to differentiate them. Oh, this is an angry part of me. This is an anxious part of me. This is my desires. This is what I want. I'm getting angry because I want this. I'm upset because I want that. Okay? We begin to differentiate. And when we do multiple selves, you'll see how this works. We are able to tolerate. We learn how to tolerate, because if we don't have any inner secure base within us, or any capacity for soothing, then emotions become very difficult to tolerate. We get blown away by them. It's like being driving a car with no shock absorbers. You just get blown away. There's no way of grounding your emotions. So tolerance becomes extremely important. And as we become able to tolerate, we can differentiate, we can make sense of our world, sense of our emotions, we can tolerate our emotions, and then we're able to integrate them. Okay, and you can read about this stuff. And then that produces transformation. So many therapies, in their different ways, helps people to understand their emotions, make sense of their motives and their feelings and their desires. They learn how to tolerate them so they can work with them, and how to integrate them, and how that allows for transformation of the self. So integration allows for transformation. Okay? People see things in new ways. They shift from one motivational system to another. They shift out of competitiveness into a caring system, for example. That would be an example of a transformation. And of course, there's good old flexibility that we know ACT likes flexibility. But of course, flexibility is important for any system. Biological systems, your heart, your lungs, all of them will function better if they have flexibility. So there's no debate about that. That's just well known. Okay, so let's have a look at this. So what we now know is then that the compassionate mind, when you activate it, it's going to be stimulating a whole range of physiological systems. That's what it's designed to do. Okay, and if it doesn't do that, then that's where your work is. So if people are doing compassionate stuff and they're not feeling anything, that's where your work is. You have to help them to practice in such a way they begin to have a feeling, right? Remember, Jan said she thought of a Buddha dressed as an earth goddess, but she couldn't really see anything, but it was just a sensation of warmth and comfort. That would be an example of a safe haven and secure base, right? By imagining this, she was able to create this. Right? So you bring online, that's what you're wanting to do. And when you do that, you're able to settle. your amygdala and sympathetic system, because you're deliberately activating your vagus and so forth. So these are really fundamental ways in which you are using compassion to generate a particular kind of mental and physiological state which will then allow you to engage in threat processing. Because if you don't have that, then it's very difficult. So this is our basic story, really. And once you've got this, you can do all kinds of stuff. You can do reappraisal or behavioral exposure or mindfulness. Here's another way in which we can understand this. When we do multiple selves, which we will do a little later, it allows us then to begin to think about our anger. We can empathize with our anger. We can understand our anger. We can tolerate our anger. We can validate our anger. And we can regulate our anger. We will be able to work with every emotion, all of the difficult emotions, by bringing compassion to that emotion. So in our groups, for example, we might choose to say, okay, so today we're going to do anger. Okay, let's see how we understand anger. How do we empathize with anger? What's anger about? What are the scary things of anger? How can we, all that stuff. When it comes to trauma, in CFT, you break trauma up into its bits, right? So we don't go herring off into trauma until we have some capacity for compassion, some capacity for grounding, some capacity for secure base and safe haven. Because otherwise, if you move into trauma, when you haven't got this internal capacity for soothing the threat system, it can get very difficult for people. Some people like to do trauma just by repetition, repetition, repetition. That's okay, it may work for some people, but for us, if you get the physiological systems that are biologically designed to regulate threat, nature set them up as threat-regulating systems. Attachment objects regulate the threat. Remember that the child going across the cliff and so on, the soothing of the ground. If you can get those systems working, you don't need to just repeat, repeat, repeat. So here we would say, somebody's like a person was talking about sexual abuse, we'd say, okay to them, let's break this up for you, let's make this manageable. When we have any kind of experience, we can have 3 major or possibly 4 emotions. Anger, disgust, anxiety, sadness. Is that true for you? Do you recognize having these emotions associated with each other? Yes. Oh, yeah. Okay, so it would help us if we work with one of the emotions at the time, because if you try and work with them all at once, it gets a little tricky. So which would be the easier one for you to start with? Which is the one you find most easier to feel? Let's look at that. So we look at that. We might do chair work. We might put a person in a chair and say, okay, let's sit in this chair and become the, let me just borrow some chairs. Can I borrow 2 chairs? Thank you, Mark. That's great. Thank you very much. One more. A demonstration. Thank you very much. We might do something like this. Okay. So, let's imagine that we have our patient here. So I say to the patient, okay, so which part of you would you'd like to start to work with? There are these different kinds of emotions that can be really overwhelming and difficult. Which part would you be able to start with? And they might say, oh, well, probably the anger part. I can feel quite angry about the abuse. Okay, so would it be all right if we just dealt with just that one emotion? Okay, so then we'd say, okay, so now sit over here. So let's sit over here. Now, to this part of you, just say how you're feeling. That's the angry self. What's going through your mind? What are you feeling? Where are you in the body? Well, I'm so angry this happened to me. And so this patient might sit there, I'll turn it around this way. I might say, yes, I'm very angry about what happened because it shouldn't have happened and whatever. And then you might say to the client, so what would you, if you could really say what you wanted to say, what would you want to say to your abuser? And they may say, oh, I don't know. And you might encourage them maybe a little bit. What would you really like to say? I suppose I'd like to say, oh, fuck you! How could you do that to me, you bastard? Can you really feel that in your body? Is that okay? Does it frighten you? Blah, blah, blah. So we'll talk about that. And then we come back over here and we invite this person to move into the compassionate self. So now I'm the patient again, so just go into compassionate self. Blah, 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 blah. So you've listened to your angry self, and the rage in your angry self is very understandable, isn't it? Yes, yes, I can understand your rage, blah, 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 blah. So then, okay, let's do that. All right, okay. This one isn't working anymore. Thank you for that. I should have realized. Okay, all right. So I'm just doing a little demonstration of this diagram. All right, so the idea is, right, that I say to the client, so which of these aspects would you find most difficult to deal with? And we'll start with the easiest one. Now let's assume, just for discussion, the client says, well, the easiest one, I suppose, the one I feel most burns me up is my anger. Okay, so the client will be sitting here, and so we get them to come into a different chair here, and then we get them to express their anger. What are you feeling? And sometimes you have to G it up a little bit, so they're able to experience the anger in the body. What's that like? What sense do they make of it? And then they come back, and you activate the compassionate self, which we'll show you how to do in a minute, in a little bit. So they do the breathing, the grounding, the focusing, and then they can relate to the angry self. I understand your rage, I can see the rage and why that is, and so on and so on. So that's important, that this part of themselves understands that part of themselves, can work with that part of themselves. The next part you might do is the fear self. Okay? So the fear self, so you might invite them then just to think about the fear self, and then they would become the anxious self. So they might just start remembering how frightened they were as a child. Now they might start to say, oh, I can't do that. No, I can't do that. If I start to think of, no, I just get overwhelmed, but I can't do it. So now this anxious self then is the self that's tricky. And so you might start doing a little bit of work around the anxious self, or it could be the sad self. The point that I'm making really is that what you're doing is you're trying to differentiate the different dimensions, different emotions associated with an experience like abuse. That's differentiation. Then you're doing tolerance of each emotion, and then you're doing integration by enabling the compassionate self to see and experience each of the three bits all in the same session, if you can. And that really produces an opportunity for beginning to integrate these different aspects of the experience. So that might be an example of how you are using your compassionate mind constantly to work with this bit, work with that bit, work with that bit. The thing is that when people have an insecure relationship, an insecure base, they don't know what to turn to. What do I turn to be helpful to me? They don't trust other people, and they certainly don't trust their inner capacities for soothing, and they have a difficulty in feeling safe. So part of what you're doing is you're creating the ability to create an internal attachment system within the mind. If you have this, if that's all you've got in your head, when you come to try to address things that frighten or upset you, you're in trouble, because you're just going to go on the attack, or you're just going to be overwhelmed. Okay? So these are quite important processes, really. So let me just see where I am. Okay, so we're coming up to your tea break. Okay. So that's just giving you a little bit of an example about how, I suppose the point that I'm trying to get across to you this afternoon is when you think about the compassionate self has to function. It has to have some functions, right? It's not just, let's be a little bit kind to ourselves, let's be nice to ourselves. Can it be something you turn towards when you need it? Do you know how to stimulate the physiological systems of the caring system? Can you use it as a secure base? Will it function for you as a soothing, safe haven when you need it? Can you use those qualities to now help you engage with the things that frighten you, upset you, traumatized you? That's how it works, okay? So that's the key question. Now, the other thing I want to put across to you is this, that the problem with a lot of our society is that we haven't learned to do that, okay? Rather, when we get into trouble, we push harder, we become critical, or we try and push away rather than engage. Instead of engaging with our pain, engaging with our rage, engaging with our fear, we push it away because we don't have what we need in order to do anything about it. See? But when you have a compassionate mind, the compassionate mind wants to be able to alleviate pain. That's its motivation, right? So when we have a compassionate motivational, when we have a competitive system, what happens is we can have a lot of surface fears. And these may well be about being inadequate or incompetent or a failure, but they are surface fears. And if you're not careful, you can get caught up in that. And you can start looking, well, what's the evidence you're inadequate? And what's the evidence you're a failure? And I certainly used to do that kind of stuff. But that's not the issue. Because what difference does it make if you're inadequate? What difference? It doesn't make any difference. What difference does it make? Okay? I'm not very good at tiddlywinks. My children can beat me at chess. I'm useless. I'm dyslexic. My language is hopeless. As Gary will tell you, I sometimes send out emails on my list that are completely incomprehensible. Even I can't read them. But it doesn't matter. Because although I try my best, it's not going to result in major rejections or hostilities. If I think it does, that's the problem. That's the problem. So the problem that we have for many of our clients is that they feel that they have to be successful, otherwise they get rejected, shamed, isolated, disconnected. And it's the bottom one, the third one, that's the real serious one. And then we're into this whole business about there's no internal secure base. They feel alone, they're self-critical, and they feel pretty bad. So also always consider, I can't see my light here, that basically what drives people really are the underlying evolved threats. Okay, and these are usually to do, but not always, usually to do with some degree of the fear of disconnection in some way, of being rejected in some way, of not being wanted in some way, of being found deficient. So we've done a lot of research on what we call fears of inferiority, and we've shown that most people are not trying to be superior, most people are trying to avoid being inferior, and that's even true for narcissists. We just published a series of papers showing that narcissists have a very high fear of failing and being left behind. Another problem that you have with this whole issue of connectedness is the fact that people can have a sense of aloneness and they want to be loved, they move closer to others, but then they have an issue of shame and they fear revelation, persecution and rejection, and so they pull away. And then they end up alone again. This is a very common cycle. Okay, very common cycle. Here's another example which I think is really quite important. And this is some work we're doing with veterans to show you how these things work. Remember the three circles, right? The drive, the threads, and the soothing, the calming, the green system, growth and digest system. What do you think happens to those systems when our soldiers go to war? Well, firstly, the threat system goes through the roof, obviously, and there's very high drive as well, of course, the dopamine system. And when they come back to their base, who operates as their secure base and safe haven? Their buddies. So basically, their security system, their attachment system, switches to their buddies. Their brains literally get rewired So their threat and drive systems and soothing systems are all now linked to the buddy. The buddies are the signal. So what do you think happens when they come home? That signal suddenly disappears. Okay? So their systems, their biological systems, are now designed, primed for high threat. But there is no secure base. They're gone. The buddies are gone, right? So what happens, right? They can't feel secure at home. I mean, this isn't everybody by any means, but some of them find it very difficult to use their partners as a secure base because the brains aren't wired for it, right? Sometimes they can feel a little anxious about being with their parents, being with their partners. And their partners say, what's the matter? Why are you so jittery? I mean, you're not at war anymore, you're home, you're safe, you're with us. You see, the brain doesn't see it that way. The brain thinks, hang on a minute, my secure base are my buddies. Where are they? They're not here. It's like the parents left the room. And they want to be with their buddies. And they find themselves wanting to go with their buddies. And they want to go drinking. They get into drinking because it calms down their threat system. And then they say, what's the matter with me? What's the matter with me? I should be happy, I should be home, but I don't feel happy. I feel agitated. I feel angry. I feel this, I feel that. Just like the child, right? Couldn't calm down. I showed you in the video. Holding the mother, couldn't calm down. And yet, what we've been doing, both in Australia and in England with Deborah Lee and people, is looking at both the veterans themselves, but also with the wives, of showing them the three-circle model, teaching them about attachment theory, and explaining to them there is absolutely nothing going wrong with your relationship. It's that your mind is being rewired to feel safe with your buddies and not at home. It's not your fault. It's absolutely not your fault. And so what we need to do is to help you just rewire, just reorientate your mind. And when they give up the shaming and the blaming and the confusion about why they're feeling what they're feeling, it settles down. It seems simple enough, but you know, people try to do it through cognitions and so on and so on. But actually do it through the way the brain actually works. The brain works through, where is my secure base in this context? Okay? Very important, very important. So that's how it works. And finally, I think before our tea break, just to remind you that one of the most common themes in many of your clients is this deep sense of loneliness. This is at the root of so much. Ask a panic patient, when you're panicking, do you feel connected or alone? Guess what they say. Ask a depressed patient, when you're depressed and down, do you feel connected or do you feel alone and separate? Ask a paranoid patient, and they'll all say the same thing. No, I feel disconnected. I feel separate. I know people are being nice to me and everything, but I just don't feel it. This sense of disconnection is very common to many. So when you're doing compassionate focused therapy, that's partly what you're going to be breaking into. You're going to be breaking into this sense of disconnection, this inability to feel a sense of connectedness to others. And you'll do that in various ways, including being helpful to other people as well as just being open to their helpfulness. Okay, so I think that's probably going to be, that's probably enough for this afternoon on these things. So after the break, we're going to move into some mindfulness training, some exercises, which we will then carry on into the evening. So that's probably enough of our background. So just to highlight once again, right? CFT is rooted in a very deep, well, I say deep, it's a basic evolutionary neuropsychological and physiological model. It's getting these systems that evolution has designed as affect regulators working for us. Because when we feel connected, when we feel supported, when we feel understood, dealing with the stresses of life is so much easier than when we don't. So I now understand your need, which is for a cup of tea. Thank you very much. Okay, so my friend here was wanting this video, and And if you want that video, it's Dad Saves the Day by joining Tutu Cat Ballerinas. So Dad Saves the Day. All right, there you go. So if you want that but just put, Dad Saves the Day. You all got it? You all happy with that? Okay, right. Now I'm going to show you something else here. Look, I'm going to put in this. Compassionate Mind Foundation. Put it into Google and you will get that. When you get that, you go onto that. That is our website. And on our website, you will see that. See lots of things. Now, there's all the workshops that we do. There's all the conference. We've got a big conference coming up in Edinburgh. Okay, and there's Edinburgh for you. That's where I did my PhD. And how to get involved. How to have community membership. Let's see, resources. So on the resources, we've got videos you can watch. Okay, so I'm going to show you the video off the website of the for voices. Now Doug knows this very well. Okay, but there's loads of things you can watch on here. Also, if you become a member, which is only about $5,000, it's not too bad. So it's only about $60. Then you'll have a lot of training videos. You'll see me doing therapy, lots of training videos, doing multiple selves, working with self-criticism and so on and so on. So just go to become a member and you can see all that. But there's quite a lot on the website itself. Now the other thing is, there is what we call the compassion list. In other words, we have an international list of CFT therapists. This is primarily for people who are interested in CFT, okay, mainly. We do have people on the list who are like to come on and argue about other therapies, then they're okay, but we prefer to have, this is a CFT list rather than let me fight with you about what compassion is list, all right? So CFT list. So just contact us, just go to contact, wherever that is, and say, I want to join your list. You'll get something every day. There's always some discussion. At the moment, there's a bit of a heated discussion going on about vegetarianism and things, which is not ideal. We do try and keep these things off. But we've had some very interesting discussions about trauma, about different patterns of breathing, the data on breathing. We've had some recent discussions on the vagus. So do join the list. Now on the list as well, you will also see special interest groups. And there's a forensic special interest group, there's a health forensics group, there's an eating disorders one, there's a child and family one. And that's for people who are interested in communicating with each other on those particular themes. Okay, so I'm going to show you this one now. This hopefully will pull some of the things together for you. Don't tell me it's not going to play, because that'd be very embarrassing. It would be very embarrassing if it doesn't play. Here it is. Maybe that's the one I need to do. Here it is. Okay.
This is a film about Stuart.
So this is a film we made some time ago to capture the nature of compassion itself and how it actually works. It's only 5. I don't know what all those. What's that all doing? I've never seen that before.
Stuart and choices.
Come on, walk to the house, she's not away. Get up, useless.
These circles represent our 3 major emotional systems and how they are balanced. The threat system kicks in.
They're coming for you. They've set you up. They know what you've done.
Now, I don't know why we've got all those. We don't get them. This is obviously an American thing. That's called ideas of reference. Okay? And for people with psychosis, it's horrible. They feel that, they hear a police car, it's coming for them and that sort of thing. So
they'll lock you up and never let you out. You might as well give up now. This is too much. It's all too much. Pathetic.
Stuart's drive system comes online.
Come on, Stuart. They don't want you in the team. Miss, go on, miss.
Stuart is starting a therapy to help him cultivate compassion for himself, his feelings, and his voices.
Weak. You're weak for seeking therapy. You're weak. Be a man. Walk away.
Don't trust her.
Over time, Stuart's therapist gradually helps him to feel more safe. They practice exercises that help him feel more grounded and still. Slowing down his body using breathing and imagery, activating his soothing system. Stuart develops an image of an ideal, compassionate person, focusing on each of its compassionate qualities. He tries to imagine what it would be like to step into this image and become this compassionate person. He walks around, acting the part of his compassionate self, getting a sense of what that would feel like, how he would think, what he would do. He practices at home as well, and gradually begins to deepen his understanding and sense of his compassionate self. As Stuart feels safer, stronger, and more courageous, he decides to start a conversation from his compassionate self to his most critical voice.
Hello. What do you want, loser? I want to understand you. I want to help you feel safe. Safe? Nothing's safe around here. If it wasn't for me, you'd be... I know you're trying to help me. Thank you. Thank you for reminding me that I get scared. You're right, I do. But I want to start overcoming my fears now. I'm ready. You want to get rid of it. No, I don't. I don't want to get rid of anyone. We can work on this together.
Hearing voices is a common human experience. It can often be linked to something difficult or painful that's happened in the past. Although tricky at times, with lots of practice and encouragement, Stuart's compassionate self becomes better developed.
Danger! Back to bed. You're not ready. It's okay, guys. Thanks for the warning. I'll keep an eye out, but there's things I need to do today. Hey, it's all right. We can manage this. We'll see. Hey.
Stuart now feels safe in relation to his voices. He understands and accepts them. They're very much part of the family, but no longer running the show. With his compassionate self in the driving seat, Stuart can now follow his true desires.
Oh dear, I don't know why that keeps coming up. Let's see if I can get rid of it. Hang on. Hold on. Okay, so this is the thing, this is how we defined it some years ago. Compassion is the courage to descend in the reality of human experience. Because the reality of human experience can be very tough, right? So hopefully you can see now, brings this thing, what you've been doing today, together a little bit, that you're creating this inner potential, that there's a part within yourself that you can go to that will help support you and has your interests in mind, will support you in the way that it does. Trying to just challenge those voices with logical evidence. Whereas if you have this real inner part, you imagine this part, it's going to work much better. And Doug here has been doing fantastic work using these ways of working. The other thing that we've been talking about is a little bit about the importance of multiple cells. But I'm going to do that tomorrow. I'll tell you this. I don't know about doing that Let me just show you this. This might be of interest to you, actually. This is quite interesting. Actually, no, I'll show that to you tomorrow, maybe. This is a bit long, that one. Okay, so, come back to here. So we're going to do a few things now, really, to get us set up for this evening. The first thing that we're going to be doing is introducing your clients to the issue of attention and attention training, and from attention training into mindfulness. Okay? So I'm not going to follow the slides too much, we're just going to do it together. And I get to sit down. There you go. Right. So firstly, we're going to be very simple, very straightforward, helping your clients understand the nature and value of paying attention to attention. Now remember, you humans, I think you're all humans, you look human to me, you have a fantastic thing called conscious awareness, which means that you can be consciously aware of your attention, where it is and what it does. No other animal can do that. You can. It's a very special gift. But do you use it? Let's see. So let's see how it works. So first of all then, put your feet flat on the floor, sit up in your chair. You don't need to write because you're going to be doing exercises. And we're going to pay attention to attention. So feet flat on the floor, and now just pay attention to your left foot. Notice the sensations of your left foot. Now a variant of this, which is quite fun actually, is imagine you're an alien mind and you're just coming into this body for the first time. So this body is like an Akbar for you. Right? You just never had a body before, it's interesting. And so you're kind of noticing, oh, this is a foot. That's interesting. Just note the sensations of your foot. And now move your attention to your right foot. And now move your attention to the sensations in your fingers. Rub your thumbs over your fingers. Okay, and that is it. We have done the practice. So then we say to our group, so what did you notice? And they go, huh? I noticed my left foot was hurting. So what you say is, so you notice a number of things about attention. Firstly, did you notice that what you paid attention to sort of got bigger in your mind? You became more aware of things that you hadn't been aware of before. So attention is like a lens, it's like a zoom lens, it's like a magnifying glass. It makes things bigger, it fills your mind. Oh yes. Did you notice that you can move your attention at will? You chose to move it to the left, from the left to the right to your fingers. Yeah, so it doesn't have to stick anywhere, you can move it. Okay. So it makes things bigger in your mind, the first thing. It's like a zoom lens, second thing. And it also keeps things out of mind. Did you notice that? And when you were aware of your fingers, you were less aware of your feet now, because attention is a limited capacity. You can't fill up your, you can't attend to all of it. Yes. And sometimes in mindfulness and attention training, it's important to remember what is not in your mind. What is not in your mind. So attending to what is, but also attending to what isn't. And this is where mindfulness becomes very interesting, because it's remembering to notice what's not there. So now I'm going to give you an example of remembering to notice what's not there. And this is a demonstration that your threat system is very dominant. It's your most dominant system. So I want you to imagine that you go Christmas shopping and you go into 10 shops, and in 9 of the shops The assistants are very kind and they help you find the present you want, and you're very pleased, and they're very helpful. And then you go into one shop and the assistant is chatting to a friend, and you wait, and eventually you say, "Excuse me, could you serve me?" And they look at you and they say, "Patience, patience, I'll be with you in a minute." And so you feel your heart rate going up, and that's the face starting to... And then when they come to serve you, they don't seem that interested in serving you. And they're kind of looking at their watch. "Yes, what do you want?" And then when you pay, you give them $20 and they give you change for 10. You say, "Hey, look, I gave you $20. And they say, "No, you didn't. You didn't give me 20. A lot of people try that on me, but I'm sharp on that. You gave me $10. So you've really crossed about this. You're very angry, about to headbutt them, and won't leave the shop. But anyway, off you go down. So who are you thinking about on the way home? And when you get home and your partner comes in and he says, "What kind of day have you had?" And you say, "Not too bad, I got some presents. But do you know what happened to me in the shop? This person was so rude. I nearly headbutted them, I really did. They told me to have patience, then they tried to cheat me, they didn't want to serve me. I mean, where do they get these people from? It's ridiculous." I blame Trump, it's all his fault, So, then your partner gets cross. "Oh my God, that's so rude." I mean, it really annoys me when I hear people treating people like that. They shouldn't do that. Why do they? So, rabbit, 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 rabbit. What's happening to your heart rate? What's happening to your blood pressure? What's happening to your partner's blood pressure and heart rate? You were hoping for a romantic evening, but you're still so angry that isn't going to happen. But hang on a moment. Wasn't 9 out of 10 people helpful to you? Wasn't 90% of the interactions you had good ones? Why aren't you remembering those? Why aren't you going over and over just how wonderful 90% of the people you saw were brilliant? Why are you only focusing on the arsehole, which is going to put your blood pressure up, make you feel terrible, and upset your partner? Why are you doing that? Because your threat system is designed to do that. Your threat system is your most powerful system. All right? And because you're not aware what your threat system is doing, you don't have any way of actually shutting it off. Because when it comes to justifiable anger, anger loves to be there. You have every right to be angry, so you're going to be angry even if it really screws up your whole evening, because you have a right to be angry, right? So the point is, this is an example where what comes into mind, particularly from your threat system, will hold your mind and push everything else out unless you use your consciousness and awareness to say, "I don't want to go there. I don't want my mind to settle there. Yes, I have every right to be angry, and yes, I was angry, and I was angry at the time, that's fine, but I don't want to be ruminating about how pissed off I am and how terrible people are, and I don't want to be ruminating about it." So one of the things that you learn then when you're doing this attention training is recognizing that your threat system will hold you in threat. When you start to worry about something, it will hold you in worry. Even though your worry can do absolutely practically nothing, you will worry. Okay? And of course the point is, it's not your fault. It's not your fault. It's not your fault you've got a threat system that will do this to you. Absolutely not. And it drives us all nuts, really. But now that we know this, how would we like to be? How would you like to be? So this is the first thing. Getting your clients to understand they would actually like to be different. So let's imagine that you go home to your partner. How would you like to have been? Well, I'd like to have been able to put it out of my mind, really, and just have a nice evening. Yes. So how do we work for you to live the life you want to live? Because your anger won't let you do that. Your anger will claim your mind. But once you've decided, actually, this is how I'd like to have been able to do with it, then that's good. The slight problem you have is when the client says, well, to be honest with you, Dr. Go, well, what I like to have done is punch the lights out. That's not so good. But generally speaking, people often recognize that they would prefer not to be ruminating on things that are upsetting them. So the first thing of attention then, right. Attention makes things powerful in your mind. Attention can hold your mind, but you can move it at will. And attention will put things out of mind. So we often say your mind is like Teflon for positives and Velcro for negatives. And that's part of its design. So your mind is like Teflon for the positives. Positives slip out of the mind very quickly. You very rarely ruminate on the positives unless you practice. Whereas the negative things that have annoyed you, upset you, or worry you, then they stick around even when you don't want them to. Mind is Teflon for the positives and Velcro for the negatives. That's Rick Hansen and others use that concept. So recognizing then that what is in control of your mind, and have you agreed for that to be in control of your mind? Do you want it to be in control of your mind? Because if you don't, what are you going to do? Now the thing is that most people haven't really thought about it. They are on what we call automatic pilot. What turns up stays up. They don't know or don't realize that through no fault of their own, that threat system will be sticky. It will hang around. It will drive their mind into places they don't really want to go. And they don't really realize that if they pay attention and they practice, they can move their attention to places that are much more helpful. So I don't want to go home all stewed up with the argument I've had at work. I want to let that go, so when I go home I'm in a good mental state. I don't want to go back to my kids all stewed up because of work. I want to be able to go home in a good mental state. Okay, so if that's what you want, how are you going to achieve it? Okay, that's the first. So the second thing then is helping your clients understand that what is in your attention and what you choose to focus on has a big impact in your body. Okay? So there are a number of ways in which we can do this. So this is the first way. So while you're sitting there in your chair for a moment, bring to mind a time where you were happy and laughing. Somebody had told you a good joke. And really play that in your mind again. Remember the joke. And as you remember it, just see what's happening in your body, what's happening on your face. Okay, so let that go now, and now bring to mind an argument that you've had with somebody. Nothing too major, but an argument, and how they really annoyed you. And as you bring that memory to mind, notice what's happening in your body, what's happening to your face, what's happening to your breathing. Okay, great. So, what you might have noticed is that when you were remembering the happy memory and the joke, you started to smile again. Looking around the room, some of you were remembering the joke. I like good jokes, so please come and tell me afterwards. And so you were smiling. Oh yeah, God, I remember that. Oh my God, that was so funny. And then, when you switched to the angry memory, oh yeah, God, they pissed me off. That was so annoying. I don't know why. Face changes, body changes. And this is because you're bringing different memories into mind, and when you bring these different memories into mind, they will come with a different body pattern. So very simple demonstration for your clients that they get quickly. So what you're paying attention to, what you are remembering. Remember, Philip was talking about the rush of memories coming into his mind when depressed people have this rush of memories of sadness and upset. Right? So what's coming into your mind will come with body patterns. So this is very, very important because a lot of your clients don't really understand the power of the mind and the body. They don't understand the link between the mind and the body. So you're having to give them examples for them to get it. And sometimes we often talk about the sexual example, partly because it's a bit of fun, but also because it's one of the most powerful demonstrations of how your imagery, your mind can control your body, that people get. That's basically what you want. They want them to understand it. Okay, so the next thing then, which moves you into mindfulness, is if your attention is so powerful, who is in control of it? Who controls your attention? Because you lose control of your attention, you lose control of your body. You've just shown that with the Christmas shoppers, right? And with the angry memory, you've just shown that. Lose control of your attention, you've actually lost control of your body. Oh, patience. Oh, I didn't realize that. Oh, yes. Right. So now then we can go into the first stage of what we call mindfulness. How many of you have done mindfulness? A few of you, not that many. Okay, great. So, doesn't matter if I get it wrong, then you won't know, will you? So, mindfulness is a way of paying attention, knowingly paying attention in the moment. Okay, and there are 3 types of mindfulness. There's what we call concentrative mindfulness, open mindfulness, and loving kindness or directed mindfulness. So first of all, we're going to do what is called concentrative mindfulness. Now this is where you are bringing your mind to a point of focus, and you're holding your mind there so that your mind can settle. And the reason that you want to do that is because the idea is that mostly our minds are very unsettled and they're chaotic. So we're going to use the breath as a point of focus. So we're going to breathe in through the nose and out through the nose. And the idea is just to hold your attention on the sensation of breathing. Noticing the breathing in, noticing the breathing out. Okay? So I'm going to invite you to do that for about 90 seconds. And just notice what happens to your mind. Just see how easy it is for you just to hold your attention, because that's what you want to do. Hold your attention where you want it, which is just on the breath. Okay? And we'll see what happens. Okay, 90 seconds. Okay, well done everybody. What did you notice? It's a bit of a big group, so it's difficult to shout out. But what people often notice is actually this is pretty difficult. Your mind probably wandered all over the place. So you were focusing on the breath, and you had this thought pop in your head, and that thought pop into your head. Where did those thoughts come from? Did you ask them to pop into your head? Do you have an intention to have that thought that popped into your head? Probably not. So what you discover when you do mindfulness is that your mind is really chaotic. It's in a turmoil. Sometimes it's called monkey mind. That's what it's called. It's just hopping about all over the place. And it's not until you try and bring it to a focus and hold your attention on a focus, which is called concentrative, that you realize that you're constantly being pulled away from your attention. Your mind wants to think, plan, imagine, because that's your new brain. That's what it's designed to do, right? Your new brain is not designed to go offline. But when you're focusing your attention, that's basically what you're doing. You're putting it offline. You're slowing down your default mode. But it's difficult. So that is concentrated attention. Now, the next thing is that you can do concentrated attention using a sensory focus. So you can do what is called mindful eating. So this means that when you're eating, you're purely focused on the sensation of eating. So what does your food look like? Really look at the texture, look at the colors of your food. Then put it into your mouth slowly. What does it taste like? What is the texture in the mouth? So the idea is that when you're doing mindful eating, you slow the whole thing down and you hold your attention purely on the activity that you're doing. And again, part of this is to help stabilize the mind, settle the mind. Now this is knowing awareness, knowing attention, knowing that you're paying attention on purpose, you're focusing in on your senses. And the reason for doing that is because you're bringing your consciousness to be alive in the present moment, because you only exist now. You don't exist in the moment to come, and you don't exist in the moment just gone. Consciousness is a strange thing. It moves in time, but it only exists at a single point in time, which is now. Strange, isn't it, really? Very, very bizarre. Consciousness is bizarre, really. Okay, so we've got this idea then that attention is very powerful. Where your attention is, your body is. Where your body is, your attention goes. Then we've got this idea that we can move it around. Then we've got the idea, but actually, our brain is moving the attention around even against our will. We don't really want it to do that. And when we try to bring it to a focus, we find it's still hopping about all over the place. So this is why we practice. Now you can focus on a sound. Each time you breathe out, you focus on the sound Om. Or you can focus on a candle. Or you can focus on your breath. And you can focus on any point that brings your attention to a stable focus. And there are many, many techniques for doing this. Okay, so the next thing that we're going to do is thinking about what is called open mindfulness. Open mindfulness. Oh, actually, there's one other thing. There's two elements to this mindfulness. The first is that what happened when you noticed your mind had wandered?
Eventually you realize your mind has wandered, and then I just came back to, breathing.
That's fantastic. Yeah, so my friend here, I noticed my mind had wandered, and so I just come back to breathing. Brilliant. But sometimes people notice their mind has wandered, and then they become critical. Self-critics are typical. God, you can't even keep your mind on your breath. It's supposed to be mindfulness. Look, you're all over the place. You're like a bloody kangaroo. Look, your brain's here everywhere. Be mindful. Look, you're not going out tonight. Just be mindful. So the next thing is to be mindful of your reactions when you can't follow your intention. Now this is going to be very important, because later in life, becoming mindful of when we can't follow our intention is very important. But there's this just a little simple one, is that when your mind wanders, you do what my friend says here, which is just notice it and bring your mind back. And in fact, that is what mindfulness is, noticing where your mind is. Mindfulness is not emptying the mind. It's not slowing the mind, although that is one of its effects, which you think. You can't do mindfulness badly. If somebody says, well, I'm not very good at mindfulness, that means they're judging mindfulness. But if they are aware that their mind is hoppity, then that's mindfulness, because they're aware what their mind is like, what it's doing, okay, hopping about. So the mind is this constant sea of bubbling thoughts and feelings and wishes and desires and hopes, fantasies. What I have to do, I have to cook dinner tonight for the kids, what I'm going to do tomorrow. Tomorrow I've got to get up and get, or whatever. Right? Bubbling, bubbling, bubbling. Think. Plan. Worry. And because of that, you'll be stimulating the physiological systems in your brain. Worry and anger and anxiety will be constantly stimulating your threat system. So you're pouring in these stress hormones into your body all the time. So by being mindful, you just turn the tap off. You turn the tap of these thoughts off. So if you turn the tap off, so you're not having the worrying thought or whatever, or when you have it, you come back to mindfulness, it allows the mind to settle. Now there are different aspects to this. One aspect is that allowing the mind to settle will help you regulate your emotions. At a deeper level, if you practice for 500 years, you start getting insight into the nature of reality. And that's a very different kind of mindfulness, when you have this deep insight into the illusions of this reality. But we're not going to do that. Okay. So two aspects of mindfulness. You notice your mind wandering, you notice your reactions to your mind wandering, but each time you try to bring your mind back gently. Oh yeah, that was the first one. So the second one. Oops. Sorry, I don't know where I'm going here. Okay, so the second one is called mindfulness on the go, and this is more open mindfulness. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is just to invite you the following. So the first part of this is to think about a holiday. Sit back and just think about a holiday. Okay, now lift your attention to observing yourself thinking about a holiday. Observing how you're thinking about your holiday. Observing what kind of images, memories are coming into your mind. You're observing yourself thinking about a holiday. So we have two levels of awareness then. We have awareness, when you think of the holiday or experiencing holiday, but we have an awareness of observing what our mind is doing. Our mind is thinking about a holiday. We can observe the mind in action. So observing what the mind is doing is open mindfulness. Observing what the mind is doing. So, for example, I'm now becoming angry. I'm now becoming anxious. I'm having this thought, I'm having this fantasy. I'm aware that this fantasy is coming to my mind. I'm aware that this worry has come into my mind. Rather than just being in the worry or absorbed in the fantasy, I'm actually one step above it, as it were, okay? Okay, so we're going to do that now. So we're going to sit still for 90 seconds and just observe the mind. You're not focusing on anything. Just observe what happens. Observe the thoughts that bubble up. Just notice whatever arises and just let it arise. Don't chase it or follow it, just let it arise. And try to stay observing the productions of your mind. Okay? without judgment, just observing where your mind goes. Going to do that for 90 seconds. Okay, so that's what we call observant. Now, one of the things to practice is learning to link in with yourself on a regular basis. Now, there are various apps that you can get which will ping you every hour or whatever and ask you what's going through your mind, so that you become more aware of your mind in action. You become more aware of what arises as it arises. So, worries or feelings or anxieties or wants or wishes. So you become aware of your mind in action, right? So what you're wanting to do is develop this observing self-function, non-judgmental observing function. And also it helps you if you begin to label your experiences. So if you're starting to feel angry, oh, I notice my angry pattern is arising. My angry mind is wanting to take the steering wheel of my mind. So you're giving yourself an opportunity to notice what is being produced in your mind. Remember, you didn't design your mind. The way it works and how it generates anger and anxiety and lust and fear, that's all being designed. What you're doing by observing it is finding out how the damn thing works. Okay? So you're not being carried along with it without your agreement. Okay, so this is very, very important. But we do mindfulness in two ways then. Firstly, we can practice mindfulness by concentrating, allowing the mind to settle, focusing on the breath, allowing the mind just to have a single focus of attention, and turn off the tap of all those thoughts and worries and fantasies and anxieties and frustrations that keep all the stuff churning. Blah. Try and turn the tap off a little bit, because every time we notice a little drip of thought come through, we think, thank you very much, come back to the... And then the other thing is we become openly aware of where our mind is and what it's doing, which is called open mindfulness. And then the third aspect of mindfulness is we start to pay attention to something specific, or you pay attention on purpose to a specific aspect of our minds, which can be loving kindness, for example. Now, in loving kindness, we just focus our mind on creating the sensation of wishing well to others. May you be well. May you be free of suffering. Okay? The mantra you use is really a little bit up to you. So we're going to do that now. This is the third aspect of mindfulness. So again, we're doing these quite simply. You can do them in more complex ways, and just see what happens when you you focus on a wish. So bring to mind somebody you care about and just focus on the wish for them to be free of suffering, or them not to suffer too much anyway, for them to be happy, for them to flourish. So now you're focusing your mind on an intention. Now, maybe somebody you kind of vaguely know. Notice the difference. And then maybe somebody you don't like very much. But you can still wish for them to be free of suffering. Because they just found themselves here just like you. Just like you, they have a start date and they have an end date. Just like you, they want to be happy. Just like you, they didn't choose to be a difficult person for you. They are what they are. And notice how you can hold this desire that they don't suffer. You don't wish them ill, but you don't need to like them. You may never want to see them. And it shows you that really this desire for people not to suffer doesn't have to be about love. Okay, great. So let's come back together again and go through the whole thing again. So first of all, we start with attention, then you can move it around, blah, blah. And then what you pay attention to in your mind would work in your body, and what your body's been activated would get hold of your attention. So what we need to do then is to pay attention to what's going on in our minds, where our bodies are, where our minds are. And if we get familiar with how this is working, then we can begin to choose where we want to put our attention, and we can practice putting our attention to places which is going to be good for our minds and good for our bodies. And that's not about avoidance, that's just about common sense. Right? But this is more of a struggle than it appears. Partly because our threat system likes to justify itself. Anger is sticky, it likes to justify itself. It likes to feel it's got a reason to be angry. Anxiety has a reason to be anxious. So it likes to hang around. So this is why we have to learn how to move the mind to places that are helpful. Okay? And then thirdly, we began to use the mind to focus on intention, which is the wishing others to be free of suffering. And we realize that we can want that, and we don't need to love the person, but we can wish them to be free of suffering. In some of the Buddhist traditions and some of the deeper traditions that I've been involved in, you might have a wish for somebody. When it is your time to die, may you die quickly, may you die peacefully, may you die surrounded by those who care for you, who love you. Okay? Whereas a malevolent wish would be, may you die slowly, painfully, and alone, because I hate you. So that would be a malevolent wish. So the opposite of a malevolent wish, when it is your time to die, may you die relatively quickly, painlessly, and by people who love you. And you can hold that wish for even people you don't like. So the idea then is recognizing that we can hold compassionate wishes, which are the opposite of malevolent wishes. So when we have a malevolent wish, we notice that that's a malevolent wish, so that's not a good thing. But I don't have to love people that I have compassionate wishes for. This is important, because there's a lot of confusion around this, particularly in people who are not that familiar with this stuff. So that's a meditation that's I quite like. When it is your time to die, may you die quickly, may you die peacefully, painlessly, may you die surrounded by people you love. And you can add all kinds of things, and may you die, with your spiritual beliefs intact, or believing the next level of existence, or whatever it is. So that's very, very important. Okay. So we've done that. Then that's in your stuff. And the next thing I think we're going to be looking at is our breathing patterns. But I'm aware that you had a long day. We're coming towards the end of the day. So I think we'll begin the breathing and body work this evening, and it's time for you to develop your practice. So this evening then we'll do body work with you, which will be doing breathing, voice tones, imagery, safe place imagery, and so on and so on. So what I'll do then is I'll just summarize the day, because it's been a long day for you. You've covered a lot of ground. So we started off really by thinking about compassion-focused therapy. Where does it come from? Well, it's partly come because we discovered that when people were doing CBT and things like that, they found it very difficult to do it in a way that was supported by compassion and kindness and so forth. Kindness is important. I mean, although I've said kindness is different to compassion, kindness is a way of being compassionate. We're not anti-kindness. And the ability to generate these states and motives within us will also be stimulating particular physiological systems. One of the things we're trying to do in CFT is to help people utilize an old motivational system called caring, and use the new brain capacities for intentionality and awareness to train that mind so that we can deal with some of the difficult challenges of life. Because if you can't do that, if you're trying to cope just with logic or challenging your thoughts, it gets very difficult. But if you practice creating an internal caring self, which is what we're going to be doing later on, this will really help you and support you. Okay? So you never fight with your mind. We never fight with the mind. Don't fight with anxiety. We don't fight with anger. We work with it. We understand it. We support it, but we don't allow it to drive the show. Just like in the video, I understand these voices. I know my feelings. It's okay. I'm not trying to get rid of them. I'm not ashamed of them. But I don't want them to run my show. I want my show to be run by my wise, compassionate self. That's what I'm going to live by. And these other parts of me will try and get control of my mind, and sometimes they will. But for the most part, I'm going to live this way. And that's the guiding light of compassion. So, thank you very much, and we'll see you at 6:30. Is it 6:30? 6:30, okay.